subject. Josh Norman's next opponent, the Atlanta Falcons, are really looking forward to this next matchup. Here's what Falcons wide receiver Roddy White told our ESPN Falcons reporter Vaughn McClure. I don't believe he's a tough guy. When you're saying you're out there talking, I don't pay attention to guys like that. I just don't think he's a tough guy. Their defense is good. They ain't over there just sitting there locking people up. They don't play defense like that. That's not how they play football. Julio Jones adding, everybody just keeps talking about Josh Norman. Josh Norman, he's a good football player. I don't think he's great yet, but he's a good football player. Skip, Atlanta, kind of defending him here.
Yeah.
What do you make of this?
Stephen A., right now, you're free to say, to step back from this and say, no Atlanta Falcon has the right to say one word about any Carolina Panther, because as we know, 2 weeks ago at Carolina, to use some of your language, they got, what are your favorite words? Ramrodded and bum rushed at Carolina?
Yep. Beat down in this particular case.
Okay, yeah, it was a complete annihilation. So you could say, shut up and try to play, Falcons. Try to salvage what's left of your season. I don't think all that applies to this man, Roddy White. I've had the privilege of getting to know Roddy when he's come in to do the show here a couple of times. I like and respect Roddy White's view of the world. He gets it. This is his 11th year in pro football. He's 34 years of age. He's in decline. We all know he's fallen down the charts. He's now their fourth leading receiver for the Atlanta Falcons as they fade, and he fades. I don't know if he's been hurt. I don't know if he's just sort of winding down his career. But the point is, this man has been a big-time receiver in this league. This man has been a Pro Bowl receiver in this league. And I'm going to maybe not take these comments all the way to the bank, but let me say that I'm going to read some credibility into the things that Roddy White said about Josh Norman. And again, just to paraphrase, first of all, he says he's not a tough guy. He says, I've known tough guys. Now, he goes to the top. He goes to Revis and Richard Sherman and Talib, and then he goes back into the past to an Al Harris and a Champ Bailey. He says those are tough guys. And again, what he respects the most about those tough guys is those guys didn't do all that much talking. They just played, and they played physical football. And Roddy White is saying that if people really knew football, they would know that the Panthers play a lot of zone. They drop into cover two, so he's got help, that he doesn't always just lock up a Julio Jones down after down after down, that he's got help from his safeties and his linebackers, because we all know Luke Kuechly can really play the pass as well as the run. So it's a scheme thing, according to Roddy, as much as it's a he thing, as in Josh Norman as the premier shutdown new corner in pro football. I'm going to listen to those remarks. And in the end, he says that all the talking that, this made me laugh actually, but all the talking that Josh Norman does, Roddy just dismisses it as yelling. He says, I don't even know what he's saying. He's just talking and talking until he's yelling, and it's almost like he can't even understand what's coming out of Josh Norman's mouth. So big picture, I appreciated the perspective into which I can now put Josh Norman in the big picture. I think he's turned into, so far this year, the best corner in pro football, just because he's made so many big plays in so many big games to help keep that team undefeated, including the play made in the end zone at Carolina on the last play of the game against New Orleans that saved the game. So I'm going to give him all that. I'm going to give him his due. But it made me think a little bit and ponder more about how I should think in the biggest picture about Josh Norman. And I appreciate Roddy saying that.
Well, we disagree, because I didn't appreciate it. And I will emphasize the word we respectfully disagree, not just because I respect the position that you're taking, but I also respect Roddy White. From 2007 through 2012, that's 6 consecutive seasons that he was a 1,000-plus yard receiver. He is a guy, when younger and healthy, produced in this league. Roddy White could play. Obviously, he's been on the show. I respect him. I like him. I think he's good people. But at the same time, I don't think that this was the appropriate time for him to say what he said, nor do I think it was appropriate for him to be the one to say anything. Let's count the ways. The Atlanta Falcons lost 6 straight and 7 of their last 8 games following a 5-0 start. They have fallen off the map, rendering themselves pretty damn close to irrelevant. 2 weeks ago, they got stomped by the Carolina Panthers. I'm talking stomped. They got beat down and embarrassed, okay? So let's understand that. Let's also understand they're within the same division, just 3 to 3.5 hours down the road from one another. All right. And the Carolina Panthers are en route to possibly an unblemished, undefeated season, the first of which we may have seen since the New England Patriots did so years ago. And if they run the table and actually win the Super Bowl, unlike the Patriots were able to do, it'll be the first time that has happened since 1972 with the Miami Dolphins. That's the reality. So you pick this moment in time to sit there and talk about what you think about Josh Norman. Let me tell you something. The players on the Carolina Panthers don't think that way about Josh Norman. I'm doing NFL Countdown a few weeks ago, and Charles Johnson is in studio for NFL Countdown. This is before they played the Atlanta Falcons. And Charles Johnson sat there and said, Stephen A., go check the numbers. Go check the numbers of what Julio Jones has been able to do the last couple of years against Josh Norman. You'll see what it does. That's a bad boy we got on the corner over there. He's special. Cam has said so. Thomas Davis, he was also in the house. He said so. Kuechly and all of these boys say so. I'm going to roll with them based on the season that they're having and the level of production that the Carolina Panthers are putting forth. Nobody said anything about Josh Norman when the Carolina Panthers were 7-8-1 and weren't necessarily winning, even though they won the division with that putrid record. Nobody said anything to him about him when he came out as the 5th-round pick, all right, and was on the Carolina Panthers for the last 4 years, the 3 previous years before this year. But all of a sudden, you want to chirp when they're winning? I remember Roddy White sitting down for an interview with Julio Jones years ago. And somebody asked him whether or not the receiving tandem for the Dallas Cowboys and somebody else were better than him and Julio Jones. Roddy White started laughing and said, are you serious? Is that a serious question? And he started mocking people that would think such levels of idiocy, and he was right. Because at the time, him and Julio Jones were bad boys. Nobody said anything. Roddy White might have a mellow voice, but he wasn't quiet. He wasn't somebody that sat there and was mute and had nothing to say. That's why he showed up on First Take, because he had a lot to say. He was on SportsCenter too. Had a lot to say. Had a lot to say in front of his lockers all of that time. Well, that was his turn. Now it's Josh Norman's turn. Don't hate on the brother. If the brother went out there and performed and contributed to handling his business, what you gonna say? Now, if you went out there and caught for 150, 200 yards and y'all had a competitive matchup, I get it. You just got stomped 38-0. Stomped. What you talking for? Wouldn't it behoove you to be quiet? Especially when you Roddy White and you haven't had 1,000-yard seasons since 2012. I know he's older and I know injuries at play. Roddy White could play when healthy and younger. Mad respect for the brother. I ain't trying to disrespect him at all. I'm simply saying to him, that was your turn. The last 3 years, you haven't had 1,000-yard receiving. You're a 4th receiver on the Atlanta Falcons right now, and the Carolina Panthers are rolling while y'all are tumbling. It ain't your turn anymore. It's his. Respect that man. That's all I'm saying. Don't come at him like that now that it's his turn, because when it was Roddy White's turn, Skip, don't tell me Roddy White was quiet. He talked, and you know that.
Okay, question. What if now, as out of line, out of place, out of time as it might be, Roddy White is still telling the flat-out truth about Josh Norman?
But wait a minute. I prefaced my comments about Roddy White by highlighting what Josh Norman's teammates say about him and his contribution to that squad.
They're not going to rip him. We know that.
Wait. Well, you'd be surprised what people do privately. They wouldn't go on the air and do it.
I got it.
But I talked to plenty of players that will rip
but they're not going to do it publicly. No, they're not going to do it publicly.
We weren't talking publicly.
Right.
I'm bringing it public because he was positive about him. Whereas if he dogged him, I wouldn't have dimed him out like that.
Okay. Now, final question. As I brought up in our previous topic, clearly psychological warfare has become a strong part of Josh Norman's arsenal. So who's to say that Roddy White isn't shrewd enough to sit back and try to turn psychological warfare back on Josh before this game in Atlanta?
Well, that's fair.
Like he's just trying to call him out just to get under his skin the way he got under Odell's skin. I don't know. He might.
That's fair. That's fair, Skip. But the flip side to that is this. Josh Norman ain't the only reason you lost 38-0. You see what I'm saying?
No,
you got stomped by a collective Carolina Panthers squad. So if you're Roddy White, shouldn't you be more preoccupied with the Carolina Panthers than you are with Josh Norman?
Okay, but who's been the biggest weapon for the Falcons when they've been right during their 5-0 start? It's Julio Jones, right? Okay,
it's Julio Jones.
Who has shut down Julio? Whether he's had help or not, Josh Norman has. And even Julio, we didn't get to that, but Julio said yesterday, oh, he's been good, but he's not great yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so, okay, that's fine. But again, maybe this is the guy you need to go after because you need to get Julio going again. Because I can just tell you what happened to my Dallas Cowboys after they led 28-17 at half of that earlier season game. It was just a wipeout in the second half because Julio took over.
All I'm saying is Julio Jones talking is one thing. Roddy White is another at this point. All due respect.
Stephen A. mentioned it. The Panthers shut out the Falcons Week 14. One of 2 shutouts in the NFL this season. The other, the Seahawks, blanking the Bears. That one was in Week 3. When we return, Stephen A. sits down with his Philly guy, Will Smith. We have an exclusive